Picture this. I nearly choked on my morning coffee when I saw my HOA fees suddenly skyrocket to $320 a month, and right as I watched Karen Bryan, our HOA board president, cruise down the street in a brand new Tesla. Bought with our money. But what these corrupt HOA tyrants didn't realize was that I had just become their new external auditor, and they had left a perfect paper trail of their schemes. How much evidence would I need to take them all down? Comment below where you're watching from. The thick envelope from the HOA felt heavier than usual in my hands that morning. I'd lived in Oak-Ade Estates for 5 peaceful years, tending my prize-winning roses and minding my own business. That peace shattered the moment I opened the notice. My monthly HOA fees were tripling to $320, effective in just 30 days. My hands shook as I reread the letter, coffee forgotten on the counter. Through my window I watched Karen strut down the sidewalk in her designer workout gear, inspecting front yards with that ever-present scowl. She stopped at my property line, pulled out her phone and snapped pictures of my roses while shaking her head. Just last week, she'd left a note claiming they were unsightly and hurting property values. These were the same roses that had won the county gardening competition 3 years running. I took a deep breath and remembered the email I'd received the day before but hadn't opened yet. Confirmation of my new role as the HOA's external auditor. The sound of screeching tires pulled me out of my thoughts. Elizabeth, Karen's right hand on the board, had just called a tow truck on Mr. Christopher's grandson's car. The poor kid had been helping build a wheelchair ramp, but apparently the work truck was an eyesore. I tucked the notice into my home office folder, next to my certified auditor credentials and 6 months' worth of questionable financial statements I'd been quietly collecting. New landscaping charges were showing up monthly, despite our dead community garden. Mysterious maintenance fees for non-existent repairs, and now a massive fee increase with no real explanation. Later, walking to my mailbox, I overheard Karen bragging to another board member about her Tesla and an upcoming kitchen renovation. Strange, considering she'd just lost her job at the real estate agency last month, but working in financial auditing teaches you to notice those details. My neighbor Lisa hurried over. "Did you get the notice too?" she whispered, glancing around. "They're threatening to put a lien on my house if I don't pay, but I'm a single mom, I can't afford this." Her voice cracked. That's when Karen's Tesla rolled up beside us. "Ladies," she chirped through the window. "Hope you're as excited as I am about the new security system we're installing next week. Cameras will help us better monitor violations." Her eyes lingered on my roses before she sped off. I smiled. I'd already seen the $50,000 invoice for that system. The company, owned by her brother, charging triple the market rate, the same brother whose landscaping company magically won every HOA contract without any competitive bids. Back inside, I opened my laptop and replied to the HOA's confirmation email. I was officially their new auditor starting next week. My hands weren't shaking anymore. A knock at the door startled me. Mr. Christopher stood there, leaning on his cane, holding a violation notice. "They want me to tear out the half-finished ramp," he said. "It doesn't match the neighborhood aesthetic. My grandson can't help now. They banned his truck. How will I get to my doctor appointments?" I looked past him at Karen's house, where workers were installing a massive unapproved fountain. Beyond that, Elizabeth was now measuring my rose bushes with a ruler, notebook in hand. "Don't worry, Mr. Christopher," I said, helping him to a chair on my porch. "Things are about to change. Would you mind telling me more about your violations?" I pulled out my voice recorder just in time to catch Karen's fountain crew accidentally crack her driveway with their truck. Funny how that wouldn't make it into the records. I just needed to stay quiet for 5 more days. 1 week until my first official audit meeting. I'd have access to every financial record, every board decision, every violation notice from the past 5 years. Karen and her crew had no idea their carefully constructed house of cards sat right next to my rose garden. My hands were sweating as I walked into the HOA office on day 1. Karen's fake smile vanished when I asked for 5 years of financial records. "Oh, those old things?" she said, twirling her handbag. "They're probably in storage somewhere." She was hiding something. I spent the next week digging through dusty boxes in the basement. The mess looked random, but every single landscaping bill came from Thompson Brothers LLC. A quick Google search confirmed it was owned by her brother, William. They were charging us 3 times the standard rate for basic lawn work. One evening, while copying these suspicious bills, Elizabeth barged into the office. "What are you doing here so late?" she snapped, peering at my desk. I calmly showed her my badge. Her face turned pale. That night, I found 3 violation notices on my door, one for my garbage can being an inch too close to the curb. The next morning, I noticed something even stranger. The HOA had paid $50,000 for emergency tree removal last summer, but when I checked old Google Maps images, not a single large tree was missing. I asked around. Mrs. Jenkins remembered something. Karen's brother's company had done tree work. It took an hour. I created a spreadsheet of the weirdest payments. $800 for painting a fire hydrant, $200 monthly for special security patrols no one had ever seen, $55,000 for holiday decorations that never appeared. Every overpriced job went to Karen's inner circle. It got even juicier when I found a stack of unresolved resident complaints marked as resolved. Mr. Christopher's ramp request, denied 3 times. Karen's backyard tiki bar, approved instantly, even though it broke 3 building codes. While photographing these documents, I heard voices in the hallway. Karen and Elizabeth were back early from lunch. I quickly returned the papers but left a tiny thread from my sweater hanging out of the file. The next day, the thread was gone. Suddenly, everyone on the board was acting overly friendly. Karen brought me coffee, suggested I take a few days off. She didn't know I'd already made copies of everything and stored them in 3 places. Just as I was leaving, a certified letter arrived for the HOA. I signed for it and nearly dropped it when I saw it was from the State Housing Authority. They were requesting an audit of our financial records. Seems someone had tipped them off. Karen stormed out of her office when she heard me gasp. Her face went white. I packed my things and headed home, wondering how long it would take her to realize I was the one who contacted the state 3 weeks ago. As I pulled into my driveway, I spotted Elizabeth and Karen whispering furiously by the pool. Karen slapped a folder into Elizabeth's arms and pointed toward the office. Her face was red with panic. Perfect. Tomorrow would be interesting indeed. The wheelchair ramp request had been denied 3 times for so-called aesthetic violations, while Karen Bryan got immediate approval for her backyard tiki bar, even though it clearly violated multiple building codes. I was carefully photographing these documents when I heard voices echoing in the hallway. Karen and Elizabeth were back early from lunch. I quickly slipped the papers back into the drawer, but left a tiny thread from my sweater sticking out of the file. I needed to know if they would check the records after I left. Sure enough, the next morning the thread was gone. And just like that, all the board members were suddenly being overly sweet. Karen even brought me coffee and cheerfully suggested I take a few days off to recharge. She had no idea I'd already made copies of everything and stored them in 3 separate places. Just as I was about to leave that day, a certified letter arrived for the HOA. I signed for it and my stomach dropped when I saw who it was from. The State Housing Authority. They were launching their own audit. Apparently, someone had tipped them off about the absurd fee hikes. Karen came running out of her office the moment she heard my gasp, her face going pale. I gathered my things to head home, wondering how long it would take her to realize that I was the one who had contacted the Housing Authority 3 weeks ago. As I walked to my car, I caught sight of Karen and Elizabeth having a heated argument near the community pool. Karen slapped a folder into Elizabeth's hands and pointed toward the office, her face flushed with fury. I smiled, knowing tomorrow would be very interesting indeed. That evening I was at my kitchen table reviewing HOA bank statements when I heard soft crying outside. It was Mr. Christopher, my 78-year-old neighbor, sitting at the bottom of his front steps in his wheelchair, gripping a bright red violation notice. I rushed outside to help. "They're fining me $5,000 for my ramp," he sobbed, his weathered hands trembling. "My son built it when I came home from the hospital last month. I can't even get into my house without it." The notice bore Karen's signature, along with a threat to place a lien on his property if he didn't pay within 30 days. My blood boiled, but I kept my voice steady. "May I take photos of this, Mr. Christopher?" The date on the violation matched something I'd flagged earlier, a suspicious $115,000 payment to Thompson Pool Services for Karen's so-called backyard improvement. While helping him up the ramp, I noticed Elizabeth peeking through her curtain next door, phone in hand. She was probably calling Karen. Perfect. I invited Mr. Christopher inside and poured him some coffee. Then I opened my laptop. "Look at this," I said, pulling up the property maps I'd downloaded from the county website. "Your ramp meets every ADA guideline. They can't penalize you for following federal law." His eyes lit up with cautious hope as I explained how the Fair Housing Act protected his rights. Just then my phone buzzed. 3 other neighbors had texted me, each with similar stories, massive fines for so-called violations that only appeared after they questioned the fee hike. One was fined $800 for a potted plant being too close to the mailbox. Another got hit with a $200 penalty for excessive wind chime noise. I heard the soft purr of Karen's new Tesla outside. Through my window, I watched her strut across my lawn in high heels, snapping pictures of my rose bushes with her iPhone. Her face twisted into a smirk as she typed furiously. Probably another fake violation. Mr. Christopher gripped my hand. "I can't lose this house," he whispered. "My wife and I built our life here." "I know," I said, squeezing his hand back, "but they've messed with the wrong community." I showed him my email drafts. "Remember last month's newsletter where Karen bragged about her new pool and gave her brother's company a glowing shout-out? Look at these invoices. They don't match. Dates, amounts, even signatures are off." Mr. Christopher leaned closer, adjusting his glasses. "My grandson's a reporter," he whispered. "He's been looking for a story about HOA abuse." At that moment, my security camera app pinged. Elizabeth was in my backyard again, measuring my rose bushes with a tape measure. Her phone was recording. She had no idea she was helping me document their campaign of harassment. I started recording a video of "Ready to help me gather some evidence?" I asked. Mr. Christopher gave a determined nod. Together we watched from inside as Karen joined Elizabeth in my backyard. They were too busy whispering and pointing to notice the 3 security cameras capturing their every move. They didn't know that tomorrow's board meeting would change everything. And I had a copy of every shady transaction they'd ever signed. Let them keep writing their fake violations. Each one was another nail in their coffin. I walked Mr. Christopher home just as the sun began to set. From my kitchen window I could see Karen and Elizabeth huddled together on the porch, whispering furiously and glaring at my house. Let them scheme. I had a mountain of evidence, and a community ready to back me up. Tomorrow would be very interesting. My heart was pounding the next afternoon as I walked into the crowded community center for the quarterly HOA meeting. The room buzzed with angry whispers about the recent fee hikes. Karen stood at the podium, tapping her manicured nails against the wood while scrolling through her phone. She was dressed in her usual designer blazer, acting like she still had everything under control. I clutched my leather briefcase, 3 months of hard evidence inside, and took my usual seat in the back row. Karen's voice dripped with manufactured charm. "As your board president, I must announce some essential fee increases to maintain our community standards," she said, clicking through a slideshow of poorly edited photos. My rose garden flashed across the screen, labeled as an eyesore requiring professional intervention. Elizabeth sat in the front row, scribbling notes like she was planning the next round of fines. She shot me a smug look. I didn't flinch. That was the same Elizabeth caught sneaking around my property at midnight on camera. Next to me, Mrs. Martinez clutched my arm. "They're going to force me to sell my house," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "I can't handle another increase." I squeezed her hand. "You won't have to," I said softly. Karen clicked to the next slide. An outrageous $50,000 proposal for new security measures, coincidentally from her husband's company. That was it. I stood up, the legs of my chair screeching against the floor. The room went silent. "Before we vote on anything," I said, voice steady despite my racing heart, "I need to make an announcement." I walked to the front and pulled out my official auditor badge. "For the past 3 months I've been serving as your external auditor, appointed and authorized by the State Housing Authority." Karen's face turned ghost white. Elizabeth stopped writing. The smugness vanished, and I hadn't even opened my laptop yet. The external auditor appointed by the State Housing Authority had just finished speaking when Karen Bryan's face turned ghost white. Elizabeth's coffee cup slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. No one moved to clean it up. I connected my laptop to the projector and brought up my findings. I've uncovered $800,000 in questionable transactions over the past 2 years, I began. The first slide showed Karen's signature on invoices from companies that didn't exist, including $200,000 for landscaping services from a company registered to Karen's brother William, work that was never performed. The room erupted in gasps and angry mutters. Karen lunged for my laptop, but I stepped back, continuing calmly. I have satellite images showing no landscape changes during these supposed improvements. I clicked through more evidence. Inflated invoices, personal expenses charged to the HOA, and suspicious bank transfers. "That's all lies," Karen screeched, her composure cracking. "I've managed this community perfectly for years. Who are you to question my authority?" She turned to Elizabeth for support, but Elizabeth was already inching toward the exit. I projected the next slide, security footage showing Karen and Elizabeth entering the HOA office at 2 a.m. last week, removing boxes of documents. "The state investigators have copies of everything," I said. "They're very interested in the pattern of selective enforcement and personal enrichment." An elderly resident stood up, pointing his cane at Karen. "Is this why you fined me for my medical ramp while approving your own unauthorized pool renovation?" Others joined in, sharing stories of harassment and unfair treatment. Karen's face twisted with rage as she realized her empire was crumbling. She grabbed her designer purse and rushed toward the door, nearly knocking over Mr. Christopher in his wheelchair. But 2 stern-looking individuals in suits blocked her exit. "Mrs. Thompson," one of them said, holding up a badge, "we're from the State Housing Authority. We'd like to ask you some questions about these financial discrepancies." I turned back to the stunned residents, my voice firm but kind. "This meeting isn't over. We have a lot of work to do to restore transparency and fairness to our community." I glanced at my watch, knowing that in exactly 1 hour the local news van would arrive. What I didn't know was that Karen had one more devastating trick up her sleeve, one that would test our entire community's resolve. My Monday started with panic at 6 a.m. I rushed outside in my pajamas to find my driveway empty. My car was gone. The same driveway I'd parked in for 3 years was suddenly marked as a no parking zone, with fresh yellow paint that still looked wet. My heart raced as I checked my security cameras, and what I saw made my blood boil. The footage showed Karen and Elizabeth sneaking around at 3 a.m. like teenagers pulling a prank. Elizabeth kept watch while Karen painted the curb yellow, then slapped a fake violation notice on my front door. An hour later, their friend Tony from Quick Tow trucked away my car while they watched from Karen's Tesla parked across the street. I took deep breaths and remembered what my lawyer had told me: document everything. I grabbed my phone and snapped pictures of the wet paint, my empty driveway, and close-ups of their boot prints in the morning damp grass. The neighborhood was quiet except for Mr. Christopher, who wheeled over to show me a video he'd taken from his window. "Look what else they did last night," he whispered, holding up his phone. The shaky footage showed Karen and Elizabeth going house to house, putting violation notices on the doors of everyone who had spoken up at the meeting. They even knocked over Mrs. Patterson's mailbox. She's the retired judge who had asked tough questions about the missing money. I called the police, but Karen had beaten me to it. She'd already filed complaints about unauthorized vehicles in the neighborhood. The young officer who arrived seemed bored until I showed him my auditor badge and the security footage. His eyes went wide. He started taking real notes. More neighbors came out as the morning went on. The Johnsons found their garden destroyed, the same garden that had won awards and made our community look good in real estate photos. The Patels' kids were crying because someone had removed their basketball hoop overnight, even though it had proper approval. Every single person who had questioned the board at the meeting got hit with some kind of violation. I was getting ready to call my lawyer when my phone buzzed with texts from other homeowners. Elizabeth was going door to door telling everyone I was under investigation for stealing HOA funds. She was waving around papers that looked official but had no letterhead or signatures. The lies were getting bigger, but so was our evidence pile. By noon, I had set up a shared online folder where neighbors could upload their photos, videos, and stories. Karen didn't know it, but she had just turned our quiet community into a team of investigators. Even teenage Billy from down the street offered to help, showing me drone footage of Karen's brother's landscaping company dumping waste in our community garden at night. The final straw came when Elizabeth posted signs around the pool calling for an emergency meeting to vote me out of the neighborhood. The signs included my private employment history, with mistakes that could only have come from illegally accessing my personal records. I smiled, knowing they had just handed me proof of privacy law violations. That evening, I sat in my home office surrounded by evidence, security footage, financial records, neighbor statements, photos of illegal changes to our property, and now, proof of privacy breaches. My hands shook as I typed up everything for my lawyer. Outside, I could hear Karen's Tesla cruising by my house. For the fourth time that day, my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. "Back off or worse things will happen," it read. I took a screenshot and added it to my growing file. They thought they were sending a threat, but they had just given me more proof. Looking at the boxes of evidence spread across my desk, I wondered what tomorrow would bring, and how many more laws they would break trying to silence the truth. I knew the morning would be different when I saw 3 news vans parked outside our community gates. My hands were shaking as I pulled out the thick manila envelope containing my final audit report. Inside were hundreds of pages of evidence showing exactly how Karen and her friends had been stealing from us for years. The reporter from Channel 5 spotted me first. "Is it true the HOA board spent $50,000 on a private party at Karen Bryan's house, calling it a community event that none of the residents were invited to?" she asked, shoving a microphone in my face. I stayed quiet, but my small smile told her everything. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Mr. Christopher. "Karen's brother just confessed. He's at the police station right now." I rushed to my computer and watched the live stream. William, Karen's brother, was crying as he admitted to creating fake landscaping bills for work that was never done. He told the police how Karen Bryan had threatened to destroy his business if he didn't help her steal from the HOA. Suddenly, my security camera app sent an alert. I opened it and watched in disbelief as Karen's white Tesla screeched into the HOA office parking lot. She ran inside, wearing her designer workout clothes, but something was different. Her perfectly styled hair was messy, and she wasn't wearing any makeup. Through my office window, I could see her frantically deleting files from the community computer. I called Detective David, who had been investigating our case. "She's destroying evidence right now," I whispered. "I'm watching it on the security camera." "Stay put and record everything," he said. Moments later, Elizabeth, Karen's faithful sidekick, showed up. She was carrying empty boxes and trying to look casual, but the security camera caught her stealing documents from the filing cabinets. I remembered how she used to brag about having a key to the office because she was so important. Then my phone rang again. It was Lisa, my neighbor from 2 doors down. She was crying. "You were right about everything," she sobbed. "Karen made me pay a $2,000 fine last year because my daughter's wheelchair ramp was an eyesore. I just found out they used that money for a spa day." Police arrived minutes later with flashing lights, but no sirens. Karen tried to run, but she tripped over her own designer handbag. As they put her in handcuffs, she screamed, "Don't you know who I am? My husband plays golf with the mayor." But the mayor was already there, standing quietly on the sidewalk, arms crossed, looking disgusted as he watched his former friend get arrested. Elizabeth tried to throw Karen under the bus, claiming she had no idea what was going on, but the security footage showed her stealing documents at midnight. When police caught her behind the dumpster trying to stuff papers into her gym bag, she said, "I was just organizing." Nobody believed her anymore. More neighbors came out to watch the scene unfold. Mrs. Peterson, who had lost her garden because Karen said it wasn't fancy enough, recorded everything on her phone. Mr. Christopher sat in his wheelchair on his front porch, smiling as he watched karma finally catch up to the people who had bullied him about his accessibility ramp. News helicopters circled overhead as police carried out box after box of evidence. Someone found a secret drawer in Karen's desk filled with cash and gift cards she had stolen from our holiday donation drive for the local children's hospital. Just when I thought it was over, my phone rang again. It was the state attorney's office. "We've been investigating HOA fraud across the county," the attorney said. "Your evidence just helped us crack open 5 other cases. How would you like to help us shut down more corrupt HOA boards?" I looked out my window at Karen, sitting in the back of the police car, still yelling at everyone. Then she caught my eye and finally recognized me, not just as the homeowner with the rose garden she hated, but as the auditor who had brought her entire corrupt world crashing down. Her face turned pale as she realized that every petty, cruel thing she had done to us had only fueled my determination to expose her crimes. As the police cars drove away, my neighbors began clapping. Someone hung a banner that read, "Our community, our rules." But I knew this wasn't just about winning. It was about making things right, and tomorrow we would start rebuilding our neighborhood, without fear and without bullies. The reporters wanted interviews, but I just smiled and walked back inside. After all, I had a meeting scheduled with the state attorney's office and 5 more corrupt HOA boards to investigate. The next day, I walked into the emergency HOA meeting, my heart pounding as I faced a packed room full of angry and confused neighbors. A local news van was parked outside, cameras already rolling. Karen sat at the board table, her designer blazer wrinkled from a sleepless night, frantically whispering to her lawyer. Elizabeth wasn't even there, probably still trying to explain to the police why security cameras caught her removing boxes of documents at midnight. The state investigators had sealed off the HOA office. Inside, they found shredded papers everywhere. But Karen wasn't as clever as she thought. She'd forgotten all about the digital backups I had secured weeks ago, every fake invoice, every suspicious payment, every deleted email. I had copies of everything. Mr. Christopher wheeled himself to the front row, smiling at me for the first time in months. His grandson had helped him remove the violation notices Karen had plastered on his ramp. The same ramp she'd tried to fine him $5,000 for, while secretly approving her own $25,000 pool renovation using HOA funds. "Before we begin," I said, pulling out my laptop, "I'd like to share some interesting numbers with everyone." Karen's face turned ghostly white as I connected to the projector. "Over the past 3 years, our HOA fees have tripled. Let's look at exactly where that money went." The room gasped as I showed the first slide, a photo of Karen's brother William's so-called landscaping company. It was just an empty storefront, but somehow it had received $400,000 for services. Next came the bank statements, showing transfers to accounts linked to Karen's personal businesses. Then, security camera footage of Elizabeth and Karen placing fake violation notices at 3 a.m. "You can't prove anything." Karen suddenly stood up, her voice shaking. "This is a witch hunt. I've served this community for 15 years. That's when William walked into the room. He looked terrified, clutching a folder. "I can't do this anymore, Karen," he said. "I'm not going to jail for you." He handed the folder to the state investigator. Every fake invoice, every kickback documented. Karen lunged for the folder, but 2 uniformed police officers stepped forward. They had been waiting quietly in the back of the room. "Mrs. Thompson," one of them said, "we need you to come with us." The room erupted in chaos as they let her out, reading her Miranda rights. The next few hours were a blur. Reporters interviewing shocked residents, investigators gathering more stories, neighbors sharing their own experiences of Karen's abuse of power. Elizabeth was arrested at the airport, trying to board a flight to Mexico. The evidence kept piling up: fake fines, personal purchases with HOA funds, kickbacks from contractors, abuse of power, and even wire fraud. A week later, we held elections for a new board. I nominated Mr. Christopher for president, and he won unanimously. His first act? Reducing our monthly fees to $800 and creating an oversight committee to review all expenses. His grandson helped set up a public website where every penny spent is now tracked in real time. My roses are blooming again. Turns out they were never actually against HOA rules. Karen had made that up because she was angry I questioned William's inflated landscaping bills. Under Mr. Christopher's leadership, we're planning a community garden on the very spot where Karen Bryan's brother William's fake landscaping company used to dump mulch. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's making things right. Still, I keep every receipt, every file neatly organized, just in case. Because the best defense against corruption is a detailed spreadsheet and a reliable security camera. Karen and Elizabeth's trials start next month. They're facing serious prison time for embezzlement, fraud, and harassment. But the real victory? Our community finally feels like home again. Neighbors wave, kids play freely. No more intimidation, no more bogus violation notices, and somehow my morning coffee tastes better, smoother, warmer. Without those ridiculous HOA fees hanging over my head, we reclaimed our peace, our power, and this time we're not letting go. We learned the hard way, but now we know. When a community stands together, no bully stands a chance.